Welcome, everyone. Just we're going to wait in a few more minutes, and then we will start the
just a minute or so. Ah, it's Regina. Good morning, Regina. A lady I haven't seen for a while, unfortunately. Ruth, I think most people are connected. Is it okay with you if we make a start? Just give me the thumbs up.
Yes, yes, I think so. More people are joining. They're just writing to me, but for sure we can start. It's 10 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Alex Benjamin. I'm the director here at the European Jewish Association, and you're all very, very welcome for what will be a special political briefing. We thank you for making it. We particularly thank our speakers, who my dear colleague Ruth is going to introduce shortly, who are joining us from the United States, where it is somewhere in the region of ridiculous o'clock, something like 1 o'clock in the morning. So anyone joining us from America, you're all extremely welcome. And if you need to stick on a fresh pot of coffee, by all means do so. This particular subject, human rights abuses in Iran and the role of the EU, has really taken on for us at the European Jewish Association a special importance since the incoming Biden administration, and certainly by repeated efforts at EU level to get the Sorry, I hope everyone heard me there. I wasn't sure if I was...
I'm so sorry, Alex, you were muted for a second, so can you try again?
Oh, sure. So I was just saying this briefing took on a particular importance for us, given the change in the US administration, and in particular as well, the increasing tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, and also the fact that Europe is very, very keen, or rather the EU seems to be very, very keen to sort of resurrect the JCPOA. And we have with us some guests who have in the past faced some horrific human rights abuses. And we're also joined by an MEP in particular who has made this a very, very important matter to her, somebody who was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Poland and Chief of the Chancellery of the President. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ruth. Ruth, as many of you know, is our head of EU institutional relations here at the European Jewish Association, and has convened this particular briefing. And with that, I'll hand over to Ruth and allow her to introduce you to our guests and get the briefing underway, which I hope many of you will and all of you will enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So good morning from me also. And on behalf of all my colleagues, I want to introduce our speakers. But before I do that, I want to welcome some very good friends of ours that are online. First of all, a member of the European Parliament, Mr. David Lega. He is from Sweden, and he is working specifically on the issue of Iran. And hopefully later, if there's any questions or anything that you would like to contribute, would be very happy to hear from you. Also very happy to see member of the European Parliament, member of Parliament, not of the European Parliament, from Greece, and an advisory board member of EJA, Mr. Konstantinos Karagounis. So we thank you for the honor of joining us. I also want to welcome very much the Iranian Women's Organization for being with us, and Mrs. Mizrahi from PECAN, which is Persian American Action Committee, if I'm not mistaken. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Civic Action Network.
Okay, thank you so much. And Mrs. Mizrahi also works with the organization called Phoenix. Is that correct?
Phoenix.
Phoenix. I'm so sorry. I killed the pronunciation. So first of all, let's start. We have two amazing speakers, and we are very happy that they're both made the effort of being here. First of all, a member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Anna Fotyga, will introduce the subject of the human rights abuses in Iran. Mrs. Fotyga.
Thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak during the event. Yes, certainly it is long-standing tradition of the European Parliament to focus on the issue of human rights in Iran. In particular, it gained certain importance after negotiations and then signing of JCPOA. There is a group of MEPs and David Lega, who is also linked to this event, is a very important part to this group. Many MEPs try to keep in the agenda development of events within Iran, actions of the state, and in particular the situation of ordinary people. We were active and outspoken during protests, trying to use tools that are at our disposal, namely resolutions, amendments to a variety of reports, and last but not least, individual and group appeals to leaders and oral, written questions, whatever. We tried simply to keep things high in the agenda. Allow me to strike one quite personal note. I speak from my office in Gdańsk. And Gdańsk, as some of you probably know, is a cradle of Polish Solidarność. Actually, I started my professional, let's say, career with this organization in the foreign department already under communist rule. That was during so-called Festival of Solidarność. And probably it is the reason why I so much look into social issues that are the effect of mullahs' rule in Iran, and assessing all aspects of this country. I must say that European policies in particular, and world policies, because it was not only EU, although EU had a quite prominent role in this arrangement. Somehow focused on issues that are related, that is true, to eventually mitigating the threat of other than civil use of nuclear power in Iran. Unfortunately, this issue, in my opinion, has been mismanaged by Iranian regime as well. But what is more important from my point of view is also that there were certain economic measures, financial measures accompanying introduction of JCPOA into force, and namely defreezing of huge amounts of money that were misused simply by mullahs' regime, and contrary to the free world expectations, those sums were not used to improve the life of ordinary people, to elevate the level of development of the country. But as usual, to strengthening consolidation of very oppressive autocratic rule in Iran. Not to name financing of terrorism, and that is also part of our action, and to military build-up of the country and threatening of variety of actors. Many MEPs are active in this area. I personally, when I speak about finances, I use documents that are available within the arrangement of FATF organization, intergovernmental organization acting against money laundering, and this organization indicating possibilities of financing terrorism by Iranian jurisdiction. I asked about this, as in many cases, similar cases, I usually do. Vice President, High Representative Josep Borrell. Earlier, I directed many questions to Federica Mogherini, holding the same position. Unfortunately, the response was not satisfactory. So I think we have to put much stress on this. In wave of protests, variety of groups in 2018, starting with protests on small traders and markets in Iran, there were numerous waves of crackdown on ordinary people, with thousands of people killed and imprisoned. Later on, the COVID situation that erupted in Iran even aggravated this situation of ordinary people, of families. So we see double-fold behavior of Iran's mullahs regime. First, autocratic power and pressure exerted externally, being it Yemen or Lebanon behavior in Syria and missile programs threatening not only the region but outside world as well. When we speak about this external picture and aspect, we have to see what is very important, and probably the most important to US authorities, administration, even new Joseph Biden administration, and that is recent signing of an agreement between PRC, the People's Republic of China, and Iran, long-standing agreement showing what we already knew for quite a long time, that Iran belongs to certain bloc, more and more consolidated and aimed at striking at let's say political West. So our joint combined interest. And there is this enormous scandal, the behavior of Iranian regime vis-a-vis Iranian people. So those who are who live in Iran in extremely dire conditions, now prevented simply having no access to basic health care in very difficult condition, COVID-19 condition. And to Iranian diaspora, big Iranian diaspora. Actually, I've been a target myself, together with over 100,000 other participants of attempted attack organized by official Iranian diplomacy in the EU. Recently, all of you probably heard about this process, court proceedings in Antwerp and ruling of the court in Iranian diplomacy was engaged in terrorist plot aimed at big gathering of Iranian opposition in the vicinity of Paris. In 2018, I participated together with my co-workers in this event as well. So that's a regime that eventually we want to engage in a variety of trade, economic relations. And we have to bear in mind that our money of European taxpayers may go may be directed to financing of very, very bad actions. Thank you.
Thank you, MEP Anna Fotyga. We now have the privilege of having with us Maryam, who, as many of you know, risked her life simply because she believes in freedom and she was protesting against the human rights abuses in her country. Maryam had to flee, and she's going to tell us her story. She had to flee, and she escaped to Belgium, and from here to Canada. It's a remarkable story, and Maryam is a very brave young woman. And we really wanted to hear from somebody. I only knew of you, Maryam, just like everyone else here, from the TV. And most of us thought that you are still in Turkey or you're still seeking asylum. So it's just really good for us to know that you are safe, and also that you're so brave and that you still want to share your story. I want to ask everyone to, if there are any questions, both for Mrs. Anna Fotyga and for Maryam, to send the questions via the chat, and then we can have a little bit more discussion later. So, Maryam?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to apologize in advance because of my broken English. If I want to introduce myself, I'm Maryam Shariatmadari from Iran, and human rights advocate and former political prisoner in Iran. I protest against mandatory hijab in 2018, and I was arrested, jailed, and tortured because of my peaceful protest. I escaped to Turkey at the end of 2018 because of the security pressure in Iran. There are many pressure, psychological pressure, but 10 days before I left Iran, something bad happened to me, and because of that, I decided to leave Iran. I was walking in the street, and some people, two guys, spraying water to my face, and they said, this time it is water, another time it would be something else. And because of that, I was frightened, and I was scared. I couldn't talk to anyone, even my mom. So I decided to left Iran and went to Turkey. As you say, I was in Turkey for 2 years, but I don't know why Turkish government decided to send back me in Iran, and they said we are here illegally, but that was not true. I registered in the system, but with the help of Belgium government, I get a visa for entrance, and I went to Belgium because the Turkey withdraw to send back me in Iran, but they say you should left here Turkey just in 20 days. And I asked many countries for a visa, for a permit to entrance, and Belgium government was the first country that helped me. And after that, after months, Canada told me that they accepted me too. They give me visa, and I have many relatives and family in Canada, so I decided to move to Canada. Now I'm in Canada and I'm safe now. I don't know, I should answer the question or say myself, whatever I want.
Talk about yourself.
Myself or human rights violence in Iran, because all I want to say about myself after that is going to something about Iran and human rights violence and my protest. I want to say about this kind of protesting a mandatory hijab. Some people ask me, why don't you choose the legal way to change these things in positive way? And why do you risk your life to protesting? I want to answer them, there were no way for me and another women. I just want to say condition in Iran. There are two organizations in Iran, two things that wouldn't let positive change happen in Iran. First, the Guardian Council, and the second one, Supreme Leader. The Guardian Council, before that, I want to say that the Islamic Republic Constitution based on Sharia law. So there are many checks and balance within the system to prevent democratic change. And Guardian Council has to approve any parliamentary decision. And they also has to approve anyone who want to run for elected office. The other one, the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, he has the absolute authority, and he has rejected any laws that he does not approve. Because of these two things, any reform wouldn't be happening in Iran because of this system designed in this way. And for me, there was no way for protesting for me and the others. And something else I want to say, it's about the Western country and politicians, Western politicians. I want to criticize this policy of appeasing the regime of Iran in the name of diplomacy. You know, whenever the Western country treat the regime with the respect, the regime, the Islamic Republic, sees it as a weakness of West and use it as a negotiation tools. You know, people in Iran reject the regime. They say no to the Islamic Republic. they chant in the streets, and they wanted the changing this regime. I don't want you, the Western country, democratic country, and Western, sorry, because of my English, and I become nervous when I talk about it. We don't want you to involve this process. All the Iranian people want to stop helping this brutal regime. And I want something from you, that please don't stand on the way of Iranian people. Please treat this regime as a terrorism, brutal and apartheid regime, not another normal, peaceful regime that can be friends with. This is not a normal regime. Which normal regime kill people, kill more than 1,500 people in just 3 days? And which normal regime should fire to the passenger plane? So all I want is criticize your policy, your appeasing policy. And something else, I don't know. I think I say everything briefly, but if there is question, I will answer you. I can't hear anyone. Ruth or
Ruth and Alex both lost their internet connection. But I would like to ask if you can tell us a bit about your growing up in Iran and about those experiences, and what was the trigger to make you start doing what you do, basically.
About myself, about tortured in Iran. Well, there are many kinds of torture in Iran.
چند ساعت تو هیچی نخوردی؟ 7 4 ساعت 4 ساعت و نیم.
There were many kinds of torture in Iran. All the time I talk about torture, I cry, but now this time I'm laughing. There are many kinds of torture in Iran. Psychological torture, verbal and physical, and I face all of them. But I want to emphasize one of them. When I was in jail, they moved me in jail to another jail, and they forced me to get naked. And I know that there were men watching me behind the door, and I couldn't reject them, because if I reject them, they forced me to do that. It was very bad for me, and all the time I had nightmare about that. And also during the interrogation, they forced me against the wall, and I was not allowed to look around. The one time I did, they started beating me with shocker. They used shocker to beat a woman, a defenseless woman. And I don't know what else can I say about myself.
Maryam, how many days were you imprisoned in Iran?
I was detained 4 times, and 2 times I was in prison 2 times. First time when I was 16, I was detained because of my hijab in the car, and third one is because of my protesting against mandatory hijab, and also second one is because of hijab too.
And what were the charges against you when you were arrested and taken into custody?
Yes, they charged me with 3 things: acting against national security, and propaganda against the system, and the third one was the poisoning minds and promoting immoral acts by removing headscarf. It's funny, but they did this, and they sentenced me to prison, 1 year prison, because of this charge.
And Maryam, is it true that you had sustained some injuries as a result of the protest when the police officer threw you on the street?
Yes, they did that. They pushed me, and after that, there are some people wanted to help me, but the police give me and push on the street and put to the car and send me to the center, and after that to the prison.
Were you given any sort of medical treatment after you had been injured?
Yes, I was injured and I had surgery on my leg, but not at that exact time. The police seized the blood coming, but they didn't anything. After, I think, a day and 20 hours, they send me to the hospital for the surgery, and the doctor says, "Why you come now? You should come sooner then." But I was alone. I couldn't do anything. And after that, they refused to give me the medicine after surgery. I have to use antibiotics, but they didn't give me. All of them because of torture. They are kind of torture.
Did you ever try to file any complaints against these officers or militias when they arrested you?
Yes, I made complaint, but they say they didn't anything. They say you should have 3 persons that testify that he put you down. I say every people says that, and there was a camera, and I couldn't find 3 persons. They were ordinary people in the street, but they say we can do. You should find 3 persons, and anyone who wanted to help me, they threatened them. They use this way to don't do anything.
Maryam, if it's okay, I wanted to ask you something.
Okay.
After you left, first of all, for everyone that is hearing your story, it's very horrific, and it's very difficult to hear what you're going through. And for us to feel, it's almost like these things are going on in front of us, and we have no power to change anything. But I heard what you said, and it's very true that the only thing you're asking from European or from Western nations is to allow the Iranian people to ask for that freedom. And thank you again for sharing your story. I wanted to ask you, after you left, did the Iranian regime threaten you once you were out of the country? For example, where you are now and while you're in Turkey?
Yes, I get many tweets in social medias because of after I come out from Iran, I'm going to indicate human rights violence in Iran, especially in social medias and in interviews. And against propaganda machine of regime. So they treat me that be silent.
Maryam, another thing I wanted to ask you specifically is there was a time that you said that you feel that your country, Iran, is like an apartheid, that there is no freedom, but specifically that the way that they treat women and other minorities, is that the way that you use that word for me was very shocking almost. Why did you say that? Why do you feel this is the case?
Sorry, can you repeat it? I didn't understand.
Ms. Mizrahi, if it's okay, if I can ask you to help with the translation. I think you understood my question.
Of course. مریم جان، شما قبلا گفته بودید که ایران یک کشور و یا سیستم اپارتاید داره. میشه لطفاً بیشتر راجع به این مسئله توضیح بدید؟ منظورتون چی بوده؟
Yes, it's the apartheid because half of the women couldn't have a normal life. All the Iranian couldn't have normal life, but there are more pressure on Iranian and women. They suffer like how I can say, for example, if a woman want to go to another country for travel, she should have her husband's or her father permit. They should have hijab, and it's kind of suppressed. I don't know how to explain it because everything against women are legally. So I call it gender apartheid in Iran. I don't know how.
We fully understand. I think we fully understand what you mean. Can I ask you specifically if during the protests, I understand this is your personal story, but I wanted to ask you, is what you went through, is it widespread? Is this what happens with other young women? Have you seen other protesters being jailed or tortured? And we do understand that the Iranian regime also executes people, even on false charges, and we're very concerned about that. So maybe you want to speak on this issue?
Yes, when I was in prison, I saw the other protester, some of them because of protesting, they charged and the regime want to execute them. And they did that. In last year, they executed people just because of their protest. And there are, I want to say something. There are two boys that the regime want to hang and to execute it. They escaped from Iran to Turkey 2 years ago, but the Turkish government sent them back to Iran. The same story that happened to me, but I was lucky. I get because of medias, they didn't do that to me. But two guys, they gave them to Iranian police, and now they are in prison and they want to execute them. And it's not just because of protest. 6 months ago, there was a man that they hang out him because of wine. He drinks wine and they arrest him. In Sharia law, there's something that if you do something more than 4 times, they can execute you. And they did it in Mashhad, one of the big city of Iran, because of they arrested by drink alcohol for 6 times. So
Maryam, if it's okay, again, thank you so much for sharing your story. I would like to ask MEP David Lega, if that's okay. He specifically within his political group, EPP, his role is specifically on the issue of Iran, and I would like him to maybe respond or ask any question that he feels is necessary at this stage.
Sure.
You are muted, MEP Lega. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing this. It shows us all on a very personal note how important it is that we keep acting on each level that we can. And I certainly wish that we could unite the EU to do more in this event. And I also would like to thank Ms. Fotyga for her remarks in the beginning. I think that this is extremely important. And we have seen a bit of a shift within the European Parliament to have a harder attitude towards Iran regarding human rights. I think that you all agree with me, especially for Ms. Fotyga, when it comes to that we actually even mentioned Iran when it came to the urgency resolution about Yemen and their role in the proxy war, and that we also managed to mention Hezbollah as a terrorist organization that comparable to Al-Qaeda and our connections with Iran in this. So things are happening, even if they are slow. And as a Swedish MEP, naturally, I'm also very worried about the situation for Mr. Jalali, who has, in the latest updates, no medical care at all, completely isolated, even though he's very sick, only 3 blankets in his cell. And I think also Sweden are stepping up their role in this. But I also would like to hear more from other colleagues on what can we do more together, because we have seen this before. It is when we work together, regardless of party, or if it's within the European Parliament or the United States, that we become stronger together. And to be able to do this, we need testimonies like yours that we just heard. So thank you so much. And anything that we can do, we will continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, MEP Lega. We have a question. This one is for MP Anna Fotyga. It's specifically, I think that you already mentioned in the beginning, but specifically they're asking regarding the Iranian diplomat that was recently charged with terrorism. And regarding the issue of Iranian interference in the EU, whether this issue is taken seriously enough by the EU or not, and have there any steps, if any steps have been taken to hold Iran accountable or combat this interference by Iran in Europe?
Thank you, and I would like to thank the author of this question. It is very important, and not only because I was mixed in this, but I think that this case may be good argument to touch imagination also, that Iran is not something some distant country that of course we have to focus, but we have our own problems, namely COVID nowadays, and just spare time may be used to raise this issue. We have to imagine that ambitions of Iran are not only nowadays to lead in the region, that is already visible with very vicious tools used. David Lega is right. I remember our discussions about Yemen just after the war there, proxy war there. But it was extremely difficult. Actually, European Parliament was one-sided at this in assessment. Now, step by step, our voice is more and more audible. When to imagine things, and I have to mention that until now, when we speak about executions after China, Iran is the country that uses capital punishment. Actually, it's not punishment. It is persecuting opposition simply in many ways, because it First and foremost, it is related to civil society, to society members that tend to question the autocratic and very brutal rule of the regime. They execute even minors in large numbers, and famous people we tend to protest in actually in every case. We have this tool of urgent cases of violation of human rights. Unfortunately, during first year or first half a year of COVID-19 in Europe, in European Parliament, our proceedings were limited. We were not able to use this tool. Now it is possible, and we know that executions touch famous sportsmen, even Olympics level sportsmen, with the whole world protesting, and Mullah's regime just staying dumb and deaf to those appeals. So we have to use other tools as well and not pretend that there are two routes. One route is our appeals, protests, diplomatic notes, eventually in defense of people, and other route is business as usual. So we have to avoid this thing. Yes, even official Iranian diplomacy is linked to intimidation of those who raise the voice in defense of Iranian people within EU, on European territory. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, MEP Fotyga. I think my colleagues have a question specifically on the issue of the elections. But first, for Maryam, the question wanted to ask, is it important to keep the sanctions pressure on Iran? Does that hurt the Iranian people, or what is your opinion about this? Does it hurt the Iranian people, or does it hurt the regime? The sanctions, the pressure, economic, whatever governments in the West feel is necessary.
I don't know if you see the video comes from Iran. People say that the regime is a liar, and all the regime say about sanctions is a lie. They say there is no medicine in Iran because of sanction, but they send medicine to Iraq, to Hashd Shabi, and they say because of sanction, we don't have enough money for people, but we saw they send money to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Lebanese, and the other terrorism organizations. And the people, Iranian people know that. They chant, our enemy is not out of here, our enemy is here. In Farsi say, dushman ma haminjast duroug migan amrikas. Says the regime, the government want to show that America and American policies is an enemy of Iran, but the people, the Iranian knows that it's not true. And they wanted to change this regime, and they think maximum pressure and would be a way, and help them to changing this brutal regime. And for the people who criticize this policy, I want to ask them, if you criticize this policy, okay, show the better one. What's your idea to helping Iranian people? And I think it's a lie that sanction hurt Iranian people from Iranian lobbies, from Islamic Republic lobbies, and I don't believe it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam.
I'm just going to jump in here very, very briefly, if I may, with a question to MEP Fotyga. Thank you, Maryam, for your answer there. MEP Fotyga, we can see that in June, at least we think it's going to be June, there's going to be elections, a presidential election in Iran. We're also seeing a number of regional elections or local elections. I think the Iranian people are going to have 4 or 5 elections around about the same time. The question is, can we anticipate, or it seems likely that Iran is actually going to take an even more hardline approach in the coming months? And if Iran takes a more hardline approach and starts cracking down even heavier on what remaining dissidents or opposition voices there are, would that prompt, do you think, a change in the EU's current attitude towards Iran? I mean, what would be, from an EU point of view, if you were just guessing, and when I say EU point of view, I mean EAS and others, what do you think would be a bridge too far for the EAS, or is there even a bridge too far for them when it comes to Iran?
Well, it's a really difficult question, let me say, although I usually think that we have simply to do our best to inform people, to exert pressure, to use tools at our disposal to simply underline the situation. Yes, there is a tighter grip of the regime over society during COVID-19. Yet there is also the other side of this. People are really, I think that it may be some momentum during these elections. Certainly when we have action of people, and we have to remember that because of COVID-19, regime released some of prisoners from prison. They were simply afraid of keeping them there. It was too much burden on them in this hot stage of very dire stage of pandemics. I think that protests are now, despite violence and crackdown of the regime, they are having really quite big scope. In late 2019, it was actually in over 30 big cities. So I think that people are now well aware about the nature of regime. I presume, yes, it may be very harsh action against elections and eventually to falsify elections with the reaction of people. Well, I have this example of Belarus now, and I think that sanctions are mild in comparison to levels of violence. But I think there is a change of attitude. So
can I just come in on the back there on the sanctions very, very briefly, if I may? Because you've touched upon something, you mentioned Belarus, for instance. Of course, now the EU has its own sanctions mechanism, if you like, under what's called Magnitsky. Do you think it's likely, or is it something, I mean, I'm not trying to put you in a difficult spot, MEP Fotyga, but do you think it's likely that sanctions regime may be used on Iran at some time in the future? I mean, it's already been used on 19 Venezuelans, I believe, some people in Myanmar, 4 Russians. It would seem a bit odd to us, given the human rights abuses that are going on there, for it not to be applied against against Iran?
Here I'm positive. I think that it is inevitable, although of all difficult, but please imagine that I had to survive the report at the beginning or in the middle of previous legislature of the European Parliament, immediately after signing JCPOA, and it was very, very vague and mild about human rights. Now I think, and David Lega is right, we are able to gain this momentum, and for majority of European Parliament, with official promotion of human rights, it is very difficult to just reject this kind of statements. So I'm positive about this. Yes, I think I can see. It requires very much attention and actually staying vigilant, knowing procedures. I use this type of action, as I say, in November, late November or December of 2019, just after crackdown on protests, when we were able to advocate protesters and put it ad hoc to the agenda of plenary session. So there is a certain will to stay united and to stay concise in our actions. Not easy, but we do this.
Very, very happy to hear that, and we're particularly grateful that yourself, MEP Fotyga, and Mr. Lega as well are at the forefront of this, because when you talk and when you stand up in Parliament, people listen, which is extremely important. Before I hand back to my colleague Ruth, Maryam, I have a question for you, if I may, because listening to your testimony, your experience, it's harrowing. Of course, most of us who live in a sort of liberal democratic world can't even get our heads around the kind of things that you've been subjected to and have had to go through. So we thank you for even having the stoicism and the courage to stand up and say what needs to be said here today. Speaking very, very personally, it's very admirable. Maryam, my question is, you're now on the other side of the world from Iran. Is there anything that you can do, or is there any line of communication open between yourself and the opposition there? Or when you leave, are you effectively just observing things from a distance? I mean, without wanting to put anyone in danger, are there sort of informal back channels or other means of communicating with the opposition to lend them encouragement, to say that what you're doing here in Europe, for instance, on this webinar, to give other people the sense that it's not futile, that there is hope, that at some stage, it might not be in this generation, but we can get our country back?
Well, the truth is continue, but now it's very different between Turkey and Canada. I feel safe here, and when I get trees, I can say to the police, and I know that they do their best for me. But when I was in Turkey, the police, the Turkish government was a threat for me, was a problem. But now here, and I got the threat, but I don't know how to say. Ms. Mizrahi, can you help me to say?
Sure.
در مورد تهدیدها خب تهدیدها ادامه داره، ولی با توجه به امنیتی که دولت کانادا زمانی که بلژیک بودم برام فراهم میکردن احساس ترسی آنچنان ندارم، چون میدونم اگه مشکلی پیش بیاد خیلی خوب انجام میدن. ولی معنیش این نیست که اینجا من در امان باشم، به خاطر اینکه سابقه کشتن افرادی که علیه جمهوری اسلامی هستن توی اروپا وجود داشته، همینطور تو کانادا. For example, فریدون فرخزاد and شاپور بختیار.
To answer your question, I do receive threats from different sources, different avenues. But the mere fact that I'm in Canada, I feel safer because I know that they will take all the measures to maintain my safety and security, which was not so much true in Turkey. The same sense of security I experienced in Belgium. But my fear is that the Islamic Republic does have a history of targeting opponents and activists in Europe and even in Canada in assassinating them. It doesn't mean that I'm totally safe, but at least I know I will be protected. Go ahead, Maddie.
Yes, I want to say some example about the people who were killed out of Iran, member of opposition like Shapur Bakhtiar and Freydon Farrokhzad in France and Germany. So I feel safe, but I know that totally I'm not safe anywhere. I'm not safe until this regime, this brutal regime exists here in the time that I feel safe, that the time that they left Iran, this brutal regime get its end. I don't know. تا زمانی که وجود داشته باشه هیچ وقت نمیتونم احساس امنیت بکنم.
So long as the Islamic Republic governs Iran, unfortunately, nobody can be safe, whether inside or outside of Iran. But Alex, I want to repeat your question to Maryam because I think you asked a very key question and that's very important. سوال آقای الکس از شما این بود که آیا شما با توجه به اینکه الان در کانادا داری زندگی میکنی هیچ گونه تماسی با ایران داری و آیا فکر میکنی بتونی بسیاری از اشخاصی که در ایران هستن بهشون پیام بدی که این حرکتشون و فعالیتشون بی نتیجه و بی اثر نخواهد موند؟
Yes, of course. I connected many activists in Iran and I speak with them, but it's dangerous for them, but they know that, but they call me, they send me many videos from Iran, from the protest, and I share it in my medias and send it to the newspaper, to the other medias. Yes, we are connected. It's meaningless outside and inside. We are Iranian people against this regime, and we are together. Wherever in Canada, if we win, it's not important where we are.
Thank you, Maryam. I wanted to also ask Mrs. Mizrahi, if this is okay. I would like you to maybe give your statement specifically on the situation in Iran. And if you want to introduce also the organization that you work with and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ruth. And Anna, it was great hearing you and knowing that you are there speaking not just for Iranian women, but also for the national security of European Union, and naturally the same goes for the United States. The comment that I wanted to make, and first I need to give you a bit of background. I have been an advocate and an attorney for the past 30 years, representing many Iranian nationals that escaped persecution from Iran. These were refugees, either outside of Iran or people who filed for asylum inside American cities. And many of them share the same story. The story is the fight for their most fundamental rights, and that is the right to hold an opinion, to be able to preserve their religious beliefs, and to be able to enjoy their particular membership in a social group. And we are talking about women, we are talking about people from the LGBTQ community, we are talking about Muslims that have their own opinions, but the Islamic Republic sees them as their opponents. For the past 40 years, the Iranian regime has been a nefarious government, a group of criminals that are operating a mafia-type system. It is composed of a family of 1,000 individuals that are taking control of the natural resources of Iran, the biggest industries, import, export, and they have been able to sustain themselves all these years because of the appeasement policy of the European countries, and unfortunately, one US administration after another. So long as we continue that policy of tolerance in the face of intolerance, I don't see any change. And, you know, if not for Iranian people, just think of your own constituents, your own citizens, that they deserve a better life. Europeans are not safe from the Islamic Republic. You see politicians getting targeted, as Anna mentioned, getting intimidated and receiving threats by the proxies and the elements of the Islamic Republic because they want to exercise their most fundamental right of speech. And in this case, so long as we remain quiet, so long as the media is heeding to the slogans and the propagation of the Islamic Republic, I don't see any chance of a change inside Iran. And if anybody cares about what Iranians say, they do not want the Islamic Republic to have any role in their future or their daily lives. And it's about time we put our foot on the ground and say enough is enough. I think this enforcement and appeasement policy of the Islamic Republic, because they continue on taking our citizens as hostages. They will negotiate their security for their own will, and they will continue the transnational suppression of advocates. People like Maryam and many other activists are afraid to speak up because if they do, their family members in Iran end up in jail. And we need to put pressure on the media to pay more attention to the plight of the Iranians instead of making arguments that this is their cultural preference. A hijab has nothing to do with a culture. Iranian women should not be forced to wear hijab, okay, where their own women and their own wives live freely in Europe, and people like Maryam and other women are subjugated to this type of treatment. Ruth, thank you so much for this opportunity. I wasn't supposed to speak, but I'm more than grateful to have been given this opportunity.
Ms. Mizrahi, you are very much a friend, and obviously, thank you so much for helping us reach out to Maryam.
Sure.
I have a question. There is a member of parliament from Spain, a friend of EJA, and unfortunately he's driving, but he sent me now, he's online, but he cannot ask the question. I wanted him to do so himself, but Mrs. Fotyga is a political question, so I will give it to you. But Maryam, if you want to answer, obviously, please do so. He's, let me just have it in front of me. And there's MP Jose Ignacio Ejanis, or Ejanis, if I pronounce it correctly. He's asking, what is your opinion, and do you have any news specifically on the financing of the Iranian regime by extreme left-wing parties here in Europe, including the one from Spain, like Podemos in Spain?
Honestly speaking, I was not aware of this, but surely I will dig into this action. I did not read about this, so I couldn't. But surely, what I say, we do finance the regime by closing our eyes on the way of spending all revenues coming out from defreezing of funds. That is what I know, but I can promise that I look into this question.
Thank you. I personally, I'm not sure. I heard that we are financing, as you said, the regime, but I also heard that the regime is financing activities here in Europe.
Sure, that is true. Yeah.
Including political involvement with parties, basically political parties. Specifically, I wasn't aware of Spain, but I was aware of a mainstream political party in Portugal. So. Maybe this is something that we have to look into it further for sure. Maryam, before we close, I wanted to ask you a personal question. As you know, we are the European Jewish Association, and I wanted to. We are all of us. We are aware of the anti-Semitism, the Holocaust denial, and the animosity, the genocidal attacks from Iran towards the Jewish people. So I specifically wanted to ask you and to thank you, first of all, for being again with us. And I know it takes a lot of courage. And you told me before that you were attacked just because you spoke with Jewish people or you gave an interview with a Jewish newspaper. So specifically about this, does that bring another level of threat into your life? And when did you encounter this the first time?
Yes, of course. And first I want to say, emphasize that there's a strong control on Jewish community in Iran. In 1979, I think there was around 100,000 Jewish in Iran, but now there are less than 10,000. So for the Islamic regime, any connection to Israel is a cause for arrest. For example, a Jewish who live in Iran couldn't talk to their relative in other countries because her or his relative traveled to Israel. If they want, they could arrest and charge her for spying. And it's happened for me too, because I have Jewish friends in Iran, and I saw they feared. They wanted to talk to their friend in other countries in Israel, but they couldn't. They suppressed it, and all the way for them is left in Iran, and they don't want because they like Iran, but they had many hardship in Iran. And for me, yes, I get many tweets because I had an interview with Israeli media and talk about this issue, and I talk about the many Iranian people want a normal relation between Iran and the other countries, especially Israel. And the regime, all the time want to say we want to wipe out Israel from the earth. and put the flag, Israel flag, on the street and force people to walk on it. And the Iranians go around and don't walk on the flag. Yes, there's many problems in Iran with Jews, with people who goes to travel and come. And it's not about Iranian. There was a woman, I say Kaylee Moore, she was in prison in Iran for 2 years because of his partner was from Israel. She traveled to Iran just as a tourist, but they arrested and they put her to the prison because of they say you are a spy. And they forced her to call to her partner and say him to come to Iran. But she didn't that. I mean, it's not only Iranian problem. It's the problem for all the people who travel to Iran. If they connected with Jewish, with Israeli, it's a cause for arrest them and charging them for spying.
Thank you so much for your honesty. This is why I call you brave. I know that I have Iranian friends and many love me, respect me, and we even help one another. But they told me that they're too fearful to appear in the same platform with me, for example, just to have a webinar with me, because I work for a Jewish organization. And they said to me that basically the Iranian regime already are accusing me that I'm against the Iranian people. And if I appear with you, I will have problems back home and threats and so forth. So this is why I call you a very brave woman. So Maryam and Mrs. Anna Fotyga, I want to thank you both again for your contributions. They are colleagues. They asked me, if you want to give a final statement, what is your message to the world? What do you want us to share with our friends? So maybe first Mrs. Anna Fotyga and then Maryam.
I wanted to send this message to Iranian people, not only women, to all Iranian society. Stay hopeful and we'll try to do our best to help you. It may take time, but I'm absolutely positive you are to win.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Maryam, what is your message to us and to us here in Europe, to our friends that are watching? Yeah. What do you want us to share about you and your story and the things that you went through?
Before that, you speak about Iranian Islamic Republic economy. I want to say just something. Sure. Yes, Iranian they had a bad economical condition, but it's because of Islamic regime policy, nothing else. They say they make enemy for themselves. Saudi Arabia, America, United States, Israel, and because of that, the people has economic problem. It's not because of the sanctions. And my message and for the European politicians, just do not help this brutal regime with negotiation and appeasement policy. Just this.
Thank you so much. I think the message is very clear. What you want us to do, and we fully appreciate and respect the courage again that you have shown us, and especially because I know that your mother is still back home and they are blackmailing you because of your mother. And I think that your mother is equally brave as you, because I know that she went to prison just because she wanted to be with you and because they wouldn't allow medicine to get to you. I know that she made herself basically go to prison so she can be with you. So I want to thank all our dear guests again and my colleagues. And unless there's anything else, I want to just thank you for your time and to speak about this very important issue. Okay.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. Alex, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing? My colleague is just trying to get.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. It just takes me a minute to unmute, showing my age with all these different buttons. It was a very, very important briefing. because I think all too often that when we mention Iran, it's a place over there, and there's so many different instances of human rights abuses going on in the world at the moment. But to actually be able to hear personal testimony, to be able to hear the voices of Maryam and Mizrahi is extremely important, because it humanizes it. It makes it, it takes it out of newspaper cuttings or on TV reports. So really, just to say that you guys, that you're not alone, that we're working very hard with MEPs, with people in power and influence to let people know about the horrific human rights abuses which are going on in Iran on a daily basis, and to ensure that Europe doesn't let up the pressure, that Iran doesn't get away in the smoke, despite its significant clout in terms of oil markets, etc. There comes a point where doing the right thing and doing what's right by the world comes above economic considerations. So listen, I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing conversation. We wish you guys nothing but the best. Maryam, you're an inspiration. Keep the fight, and keep sticking it to them ayatollahs, as they say. I'm being facetious, but no, keep doing what you're doing. It's very, very important. And that's all I wanted to say, Ruth, other than to thank you for all your hard work in making this briefing come together, in seeing so many important people and guests, and really thank you for all your work in making this happen, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.